Under the dazzling lights of the Grand Ballroom in New York City, the Harper family's annual gala was in full swing. The air buzzed with laughter and polite conversation as the city's elite mingled over glasses of champagne. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, reflecting off the polished marble floors. Waitstaff moved like shadows, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres and sparkling wine. Nathaniel Nate Harper stood at the center of it all. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, he exuded confidence. Yet, beneath his composed exterior, tension simmered. His sharp features hardened as he listened to his mother, Margaret Harper, whose icy gaze pinned him in place. "It's time, Nathaniel," Margaret said, her tone clipped and authoritative. "Amelia is perfect for you, and this union will strengthen our family's legacy. You know what's at stake." Nate clenched his jaw, his deep blue eyes flashing with defiance. "I've told you before, Mother, I won't marry someone I don't love. I'm not a pawn in your business games." Across the room, Henry Harper, Nate's father, observed the exchange silently. His towering figure and stern demeanor cast a long shadow over his son. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. "Love is a luxury, Nathaniel. Responsibility isn't optional. This is about the future of the Harper name." Nate's chest tightened under the suffocating weight of their expectations, like a chain pulling him deeper into an ocean he couldn't escape. His gaze darted around the room, searching for a lifeline. That's when his eyes landed on her, Maddie Brooks, a stark contrast to the glittering crowd. Maddie, a waitress for the evening, stood by the far wall, adjusting the tray she balanced against her hip. Dressed in a crisp black and white uniform, she seemed an unlikely presence in such an opulent setting. But something about her freckled face and warm hazel eyes struck Nate like a lightning bolt. In that instant, desperation turned to resolve. "I'm already seeing someone," Nate blurted, his voice carrying over the hum of the crowd. Margaret's expression darkened. "What are you talking about?" Before anyone could stop him, Nate strode across the room, his steps purposeful. Maddie looked up, confusion flashing across her face as Nate approached. "What are you?" she began, but Nate silenced her with a gentle yet deliberate kiss. The room fell silent, gasps and murmurs rippling through the crowd. When he finally pulled away, Maddie stared at him, her cheeks flushed with shock. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, pushing him back. "Just go with it," Nate whispered urgently, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Go with what?" Maddie demanded, her voice rising. Before she could protest further, Nate wrapped an arm around her waist and turned back to face the crowd. "Everyone," he announced smoothly, "I'd like you to meet Maddie Brooks, the woman I've been seeing." Maddie froze, her mind racing. The room erupted in whispers, with guests speculating about this unexpected revelation. Margaret's eyes narrowed to slits, while Henry's brow furrowed in disbelief. Maddie finally twisted out of Nate's grip, her voice cutting through the chatter. "You're out of your mind," she said loudly, storming out of the room. Nate stood there, momentarily stunned but oddly satisfied. The charade had begun, and there was no turning back now. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the bustling streets of Brooklyn as Nate Harper pushed open the door to a quaint coffee shop. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of soft indie music, creating an inviting atmosphere. Behind the counter, Maddie Brooks moved with practiced efficiency, her auburn hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. Maddie glanced up as the bell above the door jingled, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw Nate approaching. "You!" she exclaimed, her tone a mix of irritation and disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Nate offered a sheepish smile. "I came to apologize for last night. I realize I put you in an awkward position." "Awkward?" Maddie scoffed, crossing her arms. "You kissed me in front of a room full of strangers and declared me as your girlfriend. That's beyond awkward." "I know, and I'm sorry," Nate said earnestly, "but I have a proposition that might benefit us both." Maddie raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in her hazel eyes. "I'm listening, but make it quick. I have work to do." Nate took a deep breath. "I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend for the next 6 months. In return, I'll pay off your debts and cover your brother Leo's college tuition." Maddie's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about Leo?" "I did some research," Nate admitted. "I know he's important to you and I can help." She shook her head, disbelief etched on her face. "This is insane. You think you can buy me off to play some ridiculous role?" "It's not like that," Nate insisted. "My parents are trying to force me into a marriage I don't want. If they believe I'm committed to someone else, they'll back off. You'd be helping me out of a tight spot, and I'd be helping you and your family." Maddie bit her lip, torn between her pride and the crushing reality she faced. The mounting bills felt like stones in her pocket, pulling her down. Leo's dreams of college flickered in her mind, fragile as a candle in a storm. Could she really sell a part of herself for this? "Why should I trust you?" she asked softly. "You have no reason to," Nate replied honestly, "but I give you my word. Everything will be laid out in a contract, legally binding. No funny business." She considered him for a long moment. "Fine. But we need to set some ground rules." "Agreed," Nate said, relief washing over his features. "First, no physical contact unless absolutely necessary," Maddie stated firmly. "Second, you don't interfere with my personal life. And third, this stays strictly professional." "Understood," Nate nodded. "I can work with that." Maddie sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I can't believe I'm doing this." "Thank you," Nate said sincerely. "You won't regret it." "I already have my doubts," she muttered, turning back to the espresso machine. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have customers to attend to." Nate smiled faintly. "I'll be in touch." As he left the coffee shop, Maddie couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to become much more complicated. The elegant foyer of the Harper estate exuded grandeur, with its towering ceilings, marble floors, and a sprawling staircase. Maddie Brooks adjusted the strap of her cocktail dress, feeling out of place as she stood beside Nate. The dress, a sleek navy number he had insisted she wear, clung to her like a second skin, a far cry from her usual jeans and sneakers. "Relax," Nate murmured, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You look amazing." Maddie forced a tight smile. "I feel like I'm walking into a lion's den." "You're not wrong," Nate admitted, nodding toward his mother, Margaret Harper, who stood at the far end of the room, her sharp eyes scanning Maddie like a hawk sizing up its prey. The dinner began uneventfully enough, with polite conversation and a seemingly endless parade of courses. Maddie kept her answers short and her posture poised, determined not to give Margaret any ammunition. But as the main course was served, Margaret leaned forward, her voice slicing through the table's chatter. "So, Maddie," Margaret began, her tone laced with condescension, "Nate tells me you're a barista." Maddie placed her fork down carefully and met Margaret's icy gaze. "I work at a cafe, yes. It's honest work, and it helps support my brother while he's in school." "How noble," Margaret said, her lips curving into a faint, insincere smile. "I suppose one must do what one can with the opportunities they're given." The table fell silent, tension thick in the air. Maddie felt Nate shift beside her, but she spoke before he could intervene. "You're absolutely right," Maddie replied evenly, her voice steady. "Not everyone is fortunate enough to have their path paved for them. Some of us have to make our own way." Nate stifled a laugh, quickly raising his glass to mask his amusement. Across the table, his father, Henry Harper, raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Margaret, however, tightened her grip on her wineglass, her composure barely intact. As the dinner wore on, Maddie began to notice the subtle ways Nate shielded her, redirecting conversations when they veered too close to uncomfortable topics, and offering her quiet reassurances. For someone she had pegged as entitled, he was surprisingly thoughtful. Later that evening, as they stepped out onto the estate's balcony for some air, Maddie let out a heavy sigh. "That was brutal." "You handled it like a pro," Nate said, leaning casually against the railing. Maddie shot him a wry look. "Your mom hates me. She hates everyone who doesn't fit her mold," Nate said with a shrug. "But I've never seen anyone stand up to her like that. It was impressive." Before Maddie could respond, Nate's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "Tabloids," he muttered, handing her the phone. Maddie's stomach dropped as she read the headline, "Nathaniel Harper's Mystery Woman, Gold Digger or True Love." Accompanying the article was a photo of the two of them leaving the gala. "This is what comes with the territory," Nate said, his voice apologetic. Maddie tossed the phone back to him. "Great. Now I'm not just a fake girlfriend, I'm a fake gold digger too." "Don't worry," Nate said, his tone firm. "I'll handle it." The next morning, Maddie was stunned to see a public statement from Nate circulating online. In it, he defended her integrity, condemning the media for their baseless accusations. "Why would you do that?" Maddie asked him later that day, her voice tinged with confusion. "Because you didn't deserve that," Nate said simply. "And because I care." Maddie didn't know how to respond, her emotions warring between gratitude and uncertainty. For the first time, she began to wonder if there was more to Nate Harper than she had initially thought. The Harper estate was unusually quiet that afternoon. Maddie walked through the grand hallways, balancing a tray of coffee cups. Nate had asked her to join him in a meeting with his parents, a daunting prospect, but one she had reluctantly agreed to. As she neared the study, voices drifted out through the slightly ajar door. At first, she didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when she heard her name, she froze, her curiosity getting the better of her. "This arrangement is becoming a spectacle," Margaret said, her tone sharp. "How long do you intend to keep up this charade, Nathaniel?" "As long as it takes," Nate replied, his voice steady. "It's working, isn't it? You and Dad have stopped hounding me about Amelia." Margaret scoffed. "And Maddie, does she know she's just a pawn in your rebellion against us?" Maddie's breath caught. She pressed herself against the wall, her pulse pounding in her ears. "She knows enough," Nate said after a long pause. Margaret's voice softened, but it was no less cutting. "This won't end well, Nathaniel. She's not one of us. She'll only bring you down." "I can handle it," Nate said, though his tone lacked its usual confidence. Maddie's grip on the tray tightened, her hands trembling. Her mind raced as the realization of his words sank in. She had known this was an arrangement, but hearing herself reduced to a mere tool in his game felt like a betrayal she hadn't anticipated. The tray slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor and sending the cups scattering. The noise echoed through the hallway, cutting off the conversation inside the study. Within seconds, Nate stepped into the hallway, his expression shifting from irritation to shock. When he saw her standing there, her face pale and her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Maddie," he started, his voice faltering. "Don't," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. "Don't you dare say another word." "Maddie, let me explain," Nate pleaded, reaching for her. She stepped back, shaking her head. "Explain what? That I was just a convenient excuse to get your parents off your back? That I'm nothing more than a pawn in your ridiculous power struggle?" "It's not like that," Nate insisted, desperation coloring his tone. "At least not anymore." "Not anymore?" Maddie repeated, her voice rising. "So, what, now you suddenly care? Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" Nate ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen. But it did," Maddie said, her voice cracking. "And you used me, Nate. You used me, and I let myself believe—" She cut herself off, swallowing hard. "Maddie, please," Nate said softly, his blue eyes searching hers. "Just give me a chance to fix this." Her heart ached as she met his gaze, but the hurt outweighed the faint flicker of hope she felt. "You can't fix this," she said firmly. "I'm done." Turning on her heel, Maddie stormed out of the estate, her emotions swirling in a tempest of betrayal and regret. That evening, Maddie packed her things in the small apartment Nate had arranged for her. Ignoring his calls and texts, she focused on leaving everything behind. She was determined to return to her old life, a life she could control, no matter how difficult. With a heavy heart, Maddie returned to her hometown, determined to rebuild herself from the shards of betrayal. She threw herself into her work, channeling her pain into a community initiative she had dreamed of starting for years. A project that felt like a lifeline amidst the wreckage. A program that provided free music lessons to underprivileged children. Inspired by her late father, a passionate musician, Maddie found solace in creating something meaningful. Dad would have been proud, her brother Leo said one evening as they worked together to repaint the walls of the small community center. Maddie smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and longing. It's not much, but it's a start. Meanwhile, Nate sat alone in his penthouse, the silence deafening. He replayed the confrontation in his mind, the look of betrayal on Maddie's face haunting him. For the first time, he realized just how much she had come to mean to him. Not as part of an arrangement, but as someone who had brought light into his life. "She's gone," he said aloud, the words tasting bitter. Nate glanced at the photo on his phone, a snapshot of Maddie laughing at one of their events. He hadn't realized it then, but she had become the one thing in his life that felt real. And now she was gone. The sun hung low over the city, casting a golden glow on the skyline as Nate Harper sat in his office, staring at his phone. The screen displayed an article from a local newspaper, its headline catching his eye. "From struggles to strength, Maddie Brooks brings music to her community." Nate read the story intently, his heart clenching at the accompanying photo. Maddie stood in front of a modest building, surrounded by smiling children holding musical instruments. Her face radiated pride and determination, a reminder of everything that made her extraordinary. "You never stop surprising me," Nate murmured to himself, his fingers brushing the edge of the photo on the screen. A week later, Maddie stood in the transformed community center, preparing for its official launch. Brightly painted walls and rows of instruments created a warm, inviting space. Families and local supporters filled the room, their excitement palpable. As Maddie adjusted the microphone, preparing to thank everyone for their contributions, she caught a glimpse of someone unexpected standing at the back of the room. Her heart skipped a beat. Nate. He was dressed casually, a stark contrast to the polished suits she'd always seen him wear. His presence was unsettling, and Maddie's grip on the microphone tightened. Clearing her throat, she focused on the crowd. "This project isn't just about music," she began, her voice steady despite her swirling emotions. "It's about creating a space where kids can dream, grow, and feel seen. It's about giving back to the community that gave me so much." The room erupted into applause as Maddie stepped back, her heart pounding. She had barely made it off the stage when Nate approached her, his expression earnest. "Maddie," he said softly. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone guarded. "I read about what you're doing here, and I wanted to see it for myself," Nate replied. "It's incredible. You're incredible." Maddie crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes. "Flattery won't get you anywhere, Nate." He nodded, his expression somber. "I know I can't undo the hurt I caused, but I wanted to tell you how proud I am of you. And I wanted to help." Maddie blinked, caught off guard. "Help? How?" Nate gestured to the stage. "I've partnered with a few organizations to provide funding for the center. Not just this one, but to expand your program to other parts of the city." Maddie's jaw dropped. "You did what?" "I wanted to support what you're building here," Nate said, his voice quiet. "Because it matters. Because you matter." The room buzzed as news of Nate's announcement spread, but Maddie felt frozen in place. Her mind raced, torn between gratitude and lingering distrust. After the event, she found Nate in the garden behind the center, standing amidst the twinkling lights strung between trees. He turned when he heard her approach. "You had no right to do that," Maddie said, crossing her arms. "I know," Nate admitted, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Maddie, you've changed my life. You've shown me what it means to care about something real. And I want to help you build this, if you'll let me." Maddie searched his face, her emotions swirling. "You hurt me, Nate. I can't just forget that." "I don't expect you to," he said softly. "But I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm not the man you thought I was." Her heart ached at his words, the sincerity in his voice pulling at her resolve. "I need time," she said finally. Nate nodded, his expression resolute. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As he walked away, Maddie stood alone in the garden, her emotions a whirlwind of hope and fear. For the first time in weeks, she felt the faint stirrings of trust, though the path forward remained uncertain. Months passed, and life at the community center thrived. Maddie poured her heart into her work, overseeing classes, mentoring students, and organizing performances. Nate kept his word, supporting the center from a distance, never pressuring her for more than she was ready to give. On a crisp winter evening, the center buzzed with excitement as families gathered for the annual holiday recital. Children darted through the hallways in their festive outfits, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Maddie moved through the crowd, making last-minute adjustments to the program. "Maddie," Leo called from the sound booth, waving her over. "There's someone here to see you." Her brow furrowed as she made her way across the room. Standing near the door, casually dressed but visibly nervous, was Nate. "What are you doing here?" Maddie asked, her voice low but curious. Nate smiled, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "Can I borrow you for a minute?" The recital was minutes away from starting, but something in his eyes made her nod. "Fine, but make it quick." Nate led her into the main auditorium, which had been emptied for the performance. The lights were dim, save for a single spotlight illuminating the stage. Maddie glanced around, confused. "What is this?" she asked. Nate turned to face her, his expression soft but serious. "I've been waiting for the right moment, and I think this is it." Her heart skipped as he reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee, holding out a small velvet box. "Maddie Brooks," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You came into my life when I least expected it. What started as a lie turned into something real. Something that changed me forever." Maddie's breath caught, her mind racing. "What kiss?" Nate continued, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It was supposed to save me, but you ended up saving me instead. You showed me what it means to care, to fight for something real, and to believe in someone, even when they don't believe in themselves." Tears pricked Maddie's eyes as she listened, her hands trembling. "I don't want to waste another day without you," Nate said, his voice breaking slightly. "You've made me a better man, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Maddie Brooks, will you marry me? For real this time?" For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Maddie laughed softly through her tears, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're unbelievable, Nate Harper." Nate's smile faltered. "Is that a no?" "It's a yes," Maddie said, her voice trembling. "But only if you promise." No more drama. Relief flooded Nate's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Deal." The children and staff who had been peeking from the wings erupted into cheers. Maddie and Nate laughed as the room filled with applause, their joy contagious.